On this episode, we're talking about the Adolescent Mind.
You're listening to the Dudes and Dads Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men be better dudes and dads by building community through meaningful conversation and storytelling. And now, here are your hosts, Joel DeMott and Andy Lehman.
Joel.
Andy, I almost died on the way over here.
You did. Tell me about this story.
Okay, so here's the deal. Jackie made a delicious, as we're calling it, a delicious roasted vegetable medley.
So you're going to blame her for this accident?
Nope, it's totally my fault. Well, I mean, it's anyway, delicious, yes, roasted vegetable medley, which included some roasted cauliflower.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on cauliflower, by the way?
I like roasted cauliflower. Don't try to put it and make it in like a pizza crust or things like that.
Gotcha.
Like it's good on its own. Like I like it.
Just
there.
enjoy
it for what it is.
Enjoy it for what it is. I gotcha. Well, I was trying to enjoy it for what it is, Andy. Popped a little piece of the cauliflower into the old mouth. Yep. And immediately went to the back of my throat, down the wrong hole, and I began to just hack and cough and choke.
So you almost died. You literally almost died on the way over here.
Here's the deal. It's supposed to be a healthy snack, but if it almost kills you, is it all that healthy? I ask you. I
don't think it.
Other snacks may kill you slowly. This one nearly took me out. And so, no, seriously, I'm like, whatever. Finally, there's just this chunk of cauliflower just comes flying out my throat.
So you're on the way over. Like you're literally driving on the way over here to the studio.
When I said on my way over, I meant I was literally walking like out the door to come to the studio. Just was like, okay, everybody, see you later. Cauliflower in mouth. Cough. Hack. But hey, I made it through. The cauliflower did not win. Did not have the last word.
That's so good.
Yeah. So take that, cauliflower. What's going on with you, man?
I didn't die from cauliflower. That's what I didn't do.
That's good for you.
No, hey, it's been just a little over a week since we recorded last time, and we're back in studio. So, are
you keeping up with the NCAA March Madness?
We've been mostly watching women's basketball this time. So
good for you.
Like we've enjoyed that. I like that. So
good for you. Yes, we're equal opportunity basketball watchers. Let's see. Yeah, watching tonight. Coming over here, the two eldest boys are pretty invested. They're pretty into it. It's a good time of year. It's a fun time. I do like to talk a little trash. But as of the recording of this, and I don't want to jinx it, as of the recording of this podcast, our Fighting Irish are still in it. So
sweet. I haven't watched any of the Notre Dame games yet, so
it's too bad. It's too bad. Josiah and I got a chance to watch them play live over at the Pavilion versus Syracuse a few weeks ago. It was good. Yeah. It was good. Sat behind the visitors there, and good old Boeheim. Some of these coaches, Andy, they're getting older. When you see them in person, you're like, wow.
How are you on the? How are you there?
How are you still running up and down that court, screaming at young men? That's amazing. Hey, Andy. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Adolescent Mind, or as I was going to title it before you got all professional on us. Hey, what's wrong with my kid's brain?
So
inquiring minds want to know. No, so basically what we're talking about tonight really comes from a series of seminar presentations I gave back a few weeks ago down in sunny Florida.
We keep bringing the sunny Florida, but yeah, we did. And I didn't hear your presentation. I was going to a different seminar, but I said, hey, Joel, let's maybe talk a little bit tonight on the podcast about Adolescent Mind. And so you said, sure, let's do it. So can you give me a little quick definition?
I can, and I just want to go on the record as saying I'm not salty at all that you didn't come to my seminar. So
listen, I figured we were friends, and I had other people that I wanted to go see.
Joel rambles on enough. If Joel uses the term prefrontal cortex one more time,
I might have to.
I'm gonna lose it. Yeah. No. So
tell me a little bit about what is the definition of adolescence.
Thank you that's a beautiful segue, Andrew. Thank you. As it stands right now, the technical definition when we're talking about it. And again, we're trying to use professional institutions to guide the way on these definitions. So the Center for Adolescent Health in Melbourne, Australia, and they do a lot of international work with adolescent health. They've kind of outlined the parameters for our discussion here in terms of the definition of adolescence. So the new adolescents, we're talking about an age range. So as we're in this conversation tonight, we're talking about an age range roughly from age 10 to age 25. Now, you will notice that age range of adolescence spans both childhood and adulthood. We do use terms these days like extended adolescence. And a lot of that has to do with, there's some conversation around, okay, if you're an adolescent, what are you exactly? And we've also become to realize that when it comes to adolescence, there's a lot of brain development stuff that's going on in that time.
So you would
into the 20s.
You would also break down adolescence into like teenagers, preteens, and then like older adolescents, and then like somewhere into the 25 range.
Right. And some of that has to do with brain development patterns. Some of that has to do with stage of life issues, kind of these different intersecting things. So that's what we're talking about. But really for the good portion of the people that are listening to us who are parents of adolescent,
your kids are going to be adolescents.
Of adolescent people. We're talking about your kiddos here. And I look at, okay, well, I've got two kiddos in that, who are of at least 10 years of age, who are squarely entering into that adolescent stage. And we're asking the questions like, okay, why is adolescence so, is it important? What is it? What's the deal? Here's what we'll say. And this is where it gets juicy. The default understanding, honestly, culturally, is that adolescence is like a recent invention, like even the idea of being like that midpoint between childhood and adulthood. That's what we call adolescence. Many think of adolescence being this kind of like later modern invention, because it used to be like, no, you were a kid,
right,
and then you were an adult,
you're
right? And there wasn't like a time frame in between.
Sure.
And it's possible to say, for some people's opinion, that the in-between time, we made up that in-between time because we had dysfunctional kids that couldn't navigate.
Sure, yeah.
So it's like adolescence is more of a problem. That in-between time is a problem to be fixed, not a wonder to behold. And that's the deal. That's the issue. So we'll just get super practical on this. A few years ago, there was and the organization that I work for on occasion, I do coaching for, the Youth Cartel. They did a study back. It's been like 7-8 years ago. Well, they just asked people like, where do you get your understanding? Like, what are your understandings of adolescence? And let me see here. So 66% of the respondents said that it was a social construct, like it was just like something that was kind of like made up socially. 60% said adolescence has been a recognized stage of life for about 100 years. So
sure.
they limit it within,
which I think is interesting, because if you go back to like earlier, I don't even know what time frame, but even like, let's talk about the Bible. Yeah. Like in the Bible, I mean, when we look at like Mary was married at what, like 14?
Right.
And so like there was this, it seemed like back then, at least, the idea of adolescence was maybe even shorter.
Yeah.
Would you say? I mean, because right now it seems like, we're saying that we've got people who are 25, 26, 27 who still act like they're 15. They're going home and playing video games, and they're,
right.
Kind of taking this irresponsible, I guess, if you will, way of acting. But it seems like back in the Bible, they were 14 and they were getting married, right?
Which is where the idea comes from. There used to just be, when you say things like that and you put it in that context, it's like, well, no, there were kids and then there were adults and there was not a large amount of time in between. Or if there was a time in between, it was very, very short. And there's definitely something to be said for the adolescent process used to be able to be navigated in a shorter amount of time. Now adolescence takes longer. You could also argue because it's more complex. There are more things for young people to navigate, and maybe with fewer resources to navigate those things.
Well, hey, I want to, before we continue on here, I want to say that if you are watching live with us, you can comment right on our Facebook page, and we'll see your comments if you have anything to put into this episode. Or you can give us a call, 574-213-8702, and we can also have that on our next episode. So again, our voicemail is 574-213-8702. Or if you're live on Facebook with us tonight, just go ahead and chat in the chat room, and we'll see that with you.
Oh, that's cool. Andy, will our wives, this is the question, because I told Jackie that we're going on Facebook Live, and we'll see if she has any
comments for us tonight.
Witty comments that are not even related to the show, which is just a added bonus.
So back to the episode, or the talking about adolescence. But so you were saying that the idea of extended adolescence,
right? Now. Because there are potentially more things to navigate in life, and so that's why adolescence is taking longer. So stick with us on this, because I'm trying to like lay out the whole framework for why we think what we think about this. If it's a social construct or it's seen that way, because then like we have other, like on the survey, like other people responded, they saw adolescence. 78% said they saw adolescence as resulting from various cultural shifts, including the Industrial Revolution and extended mandated education. So, public schooling, to your point,
sure.
Earlier in the 20th century, public schooling becomes standardized, and now kids are students longer, and this is extending the time between childhood and when they are entering the workforce and being quote unquote adults. So basically, that's kind of the prevailing thought. That's where a lot of people get their ideas. And then, gosh, there was like a number of people that had this whole idea, and this is the key idea. Then this is something that I want to address. A lot of people, majority of people said that before the mid 1800s, people were viewed as either children or adults. So there seems to be like an indicator there that at one point back in the old days,
you were either an adult or a child.
Right.
You weren't in this in-between area.
Yep. You just grew up, and one day there was, I don't know, a magic wand waved over you.
Ring.
Adult. So all that to say, some of you might have ideas about what an adolescent is, or what is going on with adolescence, or the fact that or maybe the idea that adolescence is a problem to be fixed. I mean, that's the thing,
sure.
Right? Like, hey, we got these kids that are just going through life, and they don't seem to be maturing the way that I think that they should, or society thinks that they should, or whatever, or they behave in certain ways. And what do we do about all this? So, that brings us to our next point, and that is, we can see, I think it's easily demonstrated that whether the terms were being used or not, and they actually were being used, we can see the term adolescence used in back all the way to the 1400s. Sure. A lot of English literature, but on top of that, like we can see in various like literary characters, adolescent behavior clearly demonstrated in young people, and so the whole idea here is that adolescence as a life stage is kind of built into the framework of like, we could really say of how God designed things to be.
And would you say that our society has changed though, thus allowing adolescence to be longer?
Yeah. Because, okay, if you are not going into the workplace as early in life, and if you have more steps to go through before you can kind of be an adult, quote unquote, or be recognized as an adult, then yeah, it's taking more time. And
sure.
And the other thing is just, just think about how in the world does a young person become, like even in terms of financial independence, financial security, things like that. So when we're talking about adolescence, the key here, I think, what I want to argue for is basically that this is a time period, with however long it takes, it's a time period of something that could be really a gift to your kid.
Sure.
This transition time. And then it can be a gift to you if you don't see it as a problem to fix. Like, I know Jackie and I say all the time, it's like we're raising adults that we want to hang out with someday.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's the goal, is to be able to,
because most of our time, the majority of our time with our kiddos is going to be with them as adults.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank the Lord. I just as a side note, we were, if you haven't heard me go on or talk about our travel baseball family life, that's starting now. So was it last weekend? We were in Peoria, Illinois, and we, due to some other extended family health issues, we did not have, we had childcare planned that did not work out. So everybody got to go with us, and that many kids and we had one hotel room. We had one hotel room for 6 of us because that's how we had planned it.
Sure.
And how shall I say this, Andy? I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. The kids started getting on my nerves, but more than that, they were definitely getting on each other's nerves.
Sure. Yeah, that happens.
And you just think to yourself, you know what? Someday we're going to be able to be together and we're really going to enjoy it. And I'm going to hold out for that day. But for right now, good golly, the challenge. So, so I think, as we are raising kids toward adulthood, but it shouldn't be at the expense of skipping over this really important time of life. So can I tell you what's going on in your kid's brain right now?
Sure. Well, and that's kind of what I was going to ask you too. I was going to say, hey, you've talked about the idea that the prefrontal cortex isn't actually like completely developed until you're what, 23, 24?
25. Some studies are even into later 20s, and the way your brain processes things is even semi-elastic, shall we say, semi-malleable.
Sure.
Into like age 30. So some of us, our brain has been cemented a little bit longer than others.
Hey, now, I mean, you're hitting close to home here.
I'm sorry, but no.
So, I mean, what does that mean then for our kids, for us as parents? How do we parent well if our child's prefrontal cortex isn't even completely developed until 25?
10-4. So the big thing with adolescence, and this is the thing that I am trying to remember, is that adolescents tend to downplay risk.
Okay.
And they tend to be highly motivated because of where they are in life by reward. So if they go, okay, there could be a huge reward in this thing, but there is a risk, they'll act as though there's not really a risk. There's not really a risk at all.
Well, I think I've noticed that even, as I was growing up, I would say, and I don't know that I would say, I guess I didn't know that it was prefrontal cortex type stuff. But for me, it was, hey, I'm just living for me. Like I have nothing else to take care of. I have no bills. My worst case scenario, I have health insurance and a gas payment. Yeah. And then so for me, it was, there's not really that big of a deal. Now, as I'm older, I have a wife, I have 5 kids. I know for me that it's not just me that I'm living for. So the things that I do are going to affect more than just me.
There are more
Right.
risks involved, and rightfully so. Like you should, both you and I should, before we do things. I don't always do it this way, but I do think, if I make this decision and it goes bad for me, what are the implications for everybody else that will be affected? Which, to your point earlier in life, you're like, no, it is just kind of me. And
there's no one else that I need to look out for.
Yeah,
right?
it's like depending on me and whatever. We can go for it. So that can be seen, honestly, like that can be seen as like, oh gosh, that's a maturity issue. Here, the deal is, if you can encourage in the adolescent time frame, and this is something that I've been thinking about, like for your kids to take some healthy risks, now is the time to do it. Because they will increasingly, as they develop out of adolescence, they will be less and less likely to do those sort of things.
So talk to me a little bit about that. What is a healthy risk, and like what makes it healthy? And as a parent, how do we guide our kids into healthy risk? Because there are definitely risks that aren't worth taking because they're not healthy risks. Yeah. So define for me what is a healthy risk, and how do as a parent do we guide our kids into that?
Yeah, I mean, because part of that whole like risk taking thing is like we see in adolescent behavior, like drug use, for instance, right?
Sure.
So we'd say, hey, not a good risk, risk to take. But then other risks might be like trying out for a new team, like trying out for a team that they've not tried out for before. What do I do? We've got our kids. We go out to a restaurant. Our kids, and this sounds simple, our kids order their own food. Like we don't order for them anymore, or almost. Well, let me see. For the 2 oldest ones, they place their own order, and all that is it's a risk of like, it's going to be awkward to talk, talk to this other person, this adult that's at the table, and for me to like not stumble over my words and say my thing. And it could be embarrassing, and they might goof up.
Sure.
But if they do it, and they do it enough times, they'll start to realize like, I can do this, right? Or that's a meaningful, that's a meaningful exercise. So there are all kinds of like social interaction risks they can take, risks they can take with, like social risks they can take with their friends, like inviting friends to things. Our eldest, Aaron, did that a few weeks ago, had a couple of his buddies. Dude, okay, I gotta just tell you, this was freaking hilarious. So we went to, what did we go to? Anyway, it doesn't matter. We went and saw a movie together. So he and two of his 6th grade buddies, right? And I'm like, I'll be the dad that they can all hop in the car and I'll take them and I'll go with them to this movie, right? And first of all, the drive there and back was just nothing filled with those 2 guys just trying to make each other laugh the whole time, like just messing with each other. And
it's always fun to sit in the front of a car with
and they forget you're
right,
there,
and you're
right?
listening, and they don't remember that you're listening.
Yeah,
and
right.
That's a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, it was a ton of fun, and it really did my heart good because I'm like, first of all, I'm really really proud. I'm proud of my kid for the friends that he's selecting, right? Because it's like these were good dudes, and they were super funny, and but you're like, okay, but he took the risk, like he did the invite, he greased the gears so that like I got a few of the parents like texted me or making arrangements, whatever, like he got things moving with his buddies, and
nice,
and it was like, that paid off for him because he got himself a night out at the movies, right? And parents, if you don't think about those things as being risks, maybe you don't think about it from your like adult mind, but those are absolutely risks that your kids are taking, because they could be either like,
they could be rejected. And that, right. I mean, that's a huge like killer for their, I don't know, ego, like for their whole like the conscious, like if they're rejected, that goes more than just, so-and-so turned me down. That can be deep for them.
Yep. And so trying new things. The issue is where we as parents come in. It's like, well, some kids will really embrace risk. and they will really downplay potential negative outcomes, like with their safety, for instance. And that's where you as an adult, that's why we're here, is to make sure that like, hey, no, you shouldn't jump off that thing. Oh, hey, hi, Shelly. Shelly just made a comment. Shelly is, let me see. She's now taught 2 of my kids. Gosh, we love our teachers, by the way. Just such a, bless you, Shelly. Yeah, these personal stories of our kids. This is what we live for. So yeah, the adolescent mind. When it comes to adolescence, I think there's several things we can say, but the big takeaway is encourage risk taking.
Sure.
Encourage risk taking. And if you as an adult, this will be it's interesting. It'll be a challenge for you if you're like a risk avoidant person and you're playing it safe all the time, kind of thing. Your kids will pick up on that.
Sure.
Right. And then sometimes the pendulum can swing too far the other way where they're not going
to take any risks.
Yeah.
So then how would you think the best way to prime the pump to get them to take risks would be? I mean, obviously maybe taking risks yourself, but again, as an adult, like that's going to look different, especially for those of us who are older. I'm going to put that in quotes, but older. Yeah. We don't, again, like I was saying, we don't want to take the risks that we did when we were 20, 21, because we have there's more riding on what we've got going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so how as an adult do we do that?
Right. Well, Andy, I think there's a few things. Number one, you can take risk. Like there's some risk taking you can do with your kids. There's some, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. I don't know if I have any good examples right now of things that this just to tell you, I've probably become risk avoidant here recently. But like,
well, and maybe while you're thinking about that, one of the things that I can think of is, I don't want to say force your child to, but if your child is not taking risks, like we're talking about ordering at the restaurants.
Yep.
Maybe you force them to do that. Maybe you teach them how to do it. Maybe you say, hey, this is how this looks. You model it a little bit and say to do it. And then, I mean, again, that's not really taking a risk for you, but it is for your child, especially if they're younger.
Or maybe in the dead of night, you just walk into the room, put a blindfold over them, and you go drop them off.
I don't think that's a great idea.
No? Is that not? Okay.
Something tells me no.
No? I mean, I could be interesting. If you warn him about it. Like if you told Micah, let this be a little interesting, because I feel like he might go with us. If you told
it's Micah.
Hey, at any time this month, I might in the middle of the night come in, blindfold you, and take you to an undisclosed location, and you have to find your way home. Do you think
in the middle of the night?
Do you think he'd go for it?
I don't think my wife would let me do that for one. But
Julie, let's talk about this.
But anyways, I don't think he'd go for that. But so you're saying something like that where you're forcing them into a situation?
Sure. Well, I'm saying here's the deal. Maybe here's what you do. Do you see how I'm playing this out? Here's what you do. You have people follow him while we'll make it safer. We'll make it secretly safe. It'll be secretly safe, but he thinks it might be like a real oh gosh. No. Okay. So the reason I'm being ridiculous about this is that it is sort of a segue into this. One thing that we have removed from our society of sort of rites of passage with our kiddos. I think, Andy, we've talked about this previously but what that is that's all about risk management for young people, like learning those things. So, it's our kids are dying to take some risks. They really, really are. Back in the old days of rites of passage, it was like you were given like the vision quest, right? You were, and what I was joking about, but it's like you're literally dropped in the middle of the woods, and it's like, here's your spear. Don't come back till you killed whatever the thing, right? And you got to bring it back.
Sure.
And a lot of those kids, they'd figure it out. They do it. Now, some of them would die in the process.
Well, so that's probably not the greatest idea
of their vision
for us.
quest. Some of them would die. Now, just hear me out for a second, though. Some of our kids are dying today by by their own hand, actually. And I'm just being very, very serious about this, because they have not been given something, a risk or a challenge meaningful to overcome, right? And so there's a sense of purposelessness that comes with it. So there's a ditch on either side of that, of being too extreme one way or the other. But I would say the beauty of adolescence and the way that God has wired the adolescent mind is that is the time for them to engage in practices where they can push the envelope a little.
They can push the envelope, but they're still safe. So as parents, we have to guide this experience to be a safe way. Is what you're saying? So it's risky for them, and it causes them to take risks, but
we don't want your kids to die.
Right.
We don't want your kids to die.
Is that what you're saying, Joel? I mean, safe.
That's what I am saying. So maybe like encouraging them to do like a solo paragliding adventure.
My child will love it.
Golly. See, this is the point though. Some would be like, okay, I've got a cute little video a few years ago of Josiah when he was little, and
you didn't warn me about this. I could have played it on the show tonight.
You could have. Oh, if we can find it. I have it. It's on Facebook, I think. Anyway, he had never ridden a bike ever. And the bike did not have training wheels on it. It was a little bike. And I was like, hey, Josiah, you got the bike. What you doing? He's like, mind you, he's at the top of a hill while he's doing all this. And he goes, I'm going to ride this bike. And I go, have you ever ridden a bike before? And he's like, no. And I'm like, should we put training wheels on this bike? He's like, no, I'm just going to get on it and ride it. And I go, this right here is like the epitome of youthful naivety.
So how did that ride go?
So I did not let him take the ride, because he was literally first, if he made it down the hill, by the way, it was going to be going into like oncoming traffic essentially.
So you were being a good dad.
I was just like, hey buddy, how about we take one step at a time? And we probably did the training wheels first, but it's super funny. So it, again, there's a good way to guide and a less good less great, less wonderful way to guide.
So let's talk a little bit about though the idea of the kids, the adolescents being still malleable at 20, 21, when we're saying that they're adults, when the society is saying, hey, go get out, I'm kicking you. Like,
right.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Like,
yep.
I mean, so let's talk about that a little bit and how what are we supposed to do there?
Well, I would guess, and I'd love some feedback from this, from employers. I hear a lot of conversation now about folks that are of an older generation that are trying to employ 20-somethings.
Sure.
And how that is a struggle for them, because they need constant feedback. They are what we would call in our HR world high touch employees, right? Like every step of the way, you're giving them like an affirmative, like yes, you're doing the right thing, or no, you need to course correct, right? And that is, I think that's hard for a lot of people.
Sure.
It's hard for a lot of people, and they're like, just do your job. And you're not going to get a participation award for everything. And that's true. The deal is though that the previous generations, these pendulum swings, the previous generation's general lack of affirmation for things created a big void. So older employers get really upset with younger employees about their need for high touch, but it's like those people are the way they are because of what the previous generation set up. And the previous generation never wants to acknowledge that. And I feel now that I'm being like, because I am the old, like I'm a millennial, but I'm like the oldest millennial on the
face of the earth.
On the oldest millennial on the face of the earth. I was going to say right on the heels of the Gen Xer sitting across from me, slacker generation. Like I'm already starting to notice within myself, like there are some clear generational differences between myself and like the one to follow. And, a lot of that has to do with life stage. A lot of that has to do with some of them are still developing. But all of that to say, it's just, I just think the idea of adolescence, the idea of itself is actually very, very old. We see it manifesting itself in culture in a lot of different places. Some, previously young people had less time to navigate it. Now they have longer periods of time to navigate it. So,
well, and I think maybe part of that too is due to just the way that we've also set things up. I mean, if you look at it back in the day too, when you were 15, more than 15, maybe, right at 18, a lot of people weren't right into the workforce.
Correct.
Right. They were forced right into be adults. They were forced to be able to have to navigate this and do things like finances and budgets and being responsible for a family right away at 18, 19 years old. Right. Whereas now we've got people who aren't even getting married until their 30s, which it's fine, but I'm saying you're delaying that whole thing.
Correct.
You're saying, let's go to college. Let's, maybe not even figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life until you've gone through 3 or 4 years of college, and then you have to take more college, and then you're still single and you're doing it on your own and you're going out and partying and all this other stuff that you're just kind of delaying that. So would you say that it's partly a society thing in the way that we've set up society?
I think so. I mean, you mentioned marriage. The studies are out, and these studies are not from particular religious organizations that are saying, hey, surprise, surprise, better to get married as an older adolescent, or what we would call getting married young. So 20, 21, 22.
Right. Back when we got married, and I now look at it, I'm like, I wasn't even old enough to.
I couldn't run a car.
Right.
I couldn't run a car when I got married. But the fact is that there's still, again, I think it says something too, and I'd like to say, I'm curious about the brain science behind that side of thing. But I think it's like, wow, what an opportunity when both of you are still developing. If you're toward the end of your adolescent, but there's still some development going on, and you get to enter into that experience together as a married couple, great. If you're delaying some of those big life decisions and going to later, you are getting more cemented into how you do things, and it can certainly pose some some challenges for people. But yeah, I think ultimately, Andy, like, as I've been just thinking through this, it's just kind of like, this season of life can be really, really meaningful for people, can be really, really valuable for people. If adolescence is not reduced to just like a kind of like, again, a problem to be solved in this period of time where it's just like, it's like, oh, these people are just like they're like a wreck, Mm-hmm. And we just like, we got to help them. We just got to help them get through all of this. And, because I like what I call it my grandpa story. And it's my grandfather who was born in, I always say 1930 because it's just easiest to remember. It's somewhere
around there.
Somewhere close to there. But just like you said, 18 years old, graduates high school, married shortly after, inherits the family farm, is working a second job, and then starts his family.
Yeah.
And by the time he's in the mid-20s, like, he's got his family, and kind of his job path and all of that is like cemented in place. And he's going through all those major life changes within a short amount of time, well before many on average are even, like you said, are married here in the U.S. anyway. So yeah, I think, things have changed, but those early years of life could be really, really meaningful, specifically if there's a community of people that are coming around our young people and helping them navigate it. So that's the whole big thing about adolescence, and how I just want to encourage people to kind of reconsider it as a valuable time, as a time where good things can happen, good challenges can occur. But then also, we also talked about, like, there's always, especially for us here on the show, we're always talking about like faith formation too, in these years, and like why it's important. And I'm trying to, as someone who spent a lot of time pastoring young people and now who is trying to lead people who are leading young people, my biggest call for, it was this past summer I did a seminar and it was specifically for high school students, and I had a lot of upperclassmen come to the seminar, and my conversation with them was primarily around like, hey, make a decision now for how you're going to be spiritually formed, because no one else is going to make this decision for you, and you're going to have a lot of things thrown at you in these next years, and it won't just happen automatically. And so there's some practices and some postures that you need to take to be what, and I'm quoting Fuller Youth Ministry here. It's to be what is kind of identified as a resilient disciple, someone who has longstanding faith and who is who's healthy.
Sure. So I would say that the first practice for resilient disciples would be definitely intimacy with Jesus. We can't imitate somebody that we don't know. We can't be like somebody if we don't know what they're like. And so we definitely need to have that intimacy with Jesus, and show our kids that, and guide our kids into that intimacy and closeness with Jesus.
Yeah, man, that's been a conversation I've had with our leadership, like the team that I lead now, and some other folks, like intimacy with Christ, or we've said abiding in Christ, that kind of language. Gosh, I don't know. Culturally, I don't know if we're too good at abiding in things. Yeah. That's kind of foreign language, but that is where it starts. Yes, first and foremost. And, for most people, I don't know, Andy, like abiding requires slowing down, reflecting, doing these things. And if you're in everything is so fast paced. Everything is so instant. And you can't microwave spirituality. So yeah, there's that. You've got the list right in front of you there.
I do. So the second one would be developing muscles of cultural discernment.
Yep. That's a good one. That right there is just like recognize that you, one way or the other, culture is discipling you. So which culture or what group of people are you going to allow to disciple you? But you are going to be discipled one way or the other. So being aware of that.
And then this one I really, really like is the forge meaningful intergenerational relationships.
Oh, come on.
Let me say that again for those in the back.
Yes.
Forge meaningful intergenerational relationships. I think that's super important, and we don't do that nearly enough today.
No.
It's important for us to have not only relationships with our peers, but the kids having relationships with their peers. But like, I want my kids to have relationships. I think you've said it, Joel, before. Like 5 adults, or
yeah. You look to have we always, when I was in youth ministry, the goal was to have 5 meaningful spiritual relationships with adults that were not mom and dad over the course of their middle school and high school career. So from age 12 to 18, 19, that was the goal. I've always said, like, when it comes to youth and young adult ministry, there is no magic bullet, but if you wanted to name a magic bullet, if you wanted to get close to it,
it would be that.
Yes. Intergenerational relationship. So, and again, like in these adolescent years, like knowing what we're knowing about how our brains, how our minds, how our beings are being formed, wouldn't you like to know that your kid that their formation is occurring from people,
good people who are
develop them, who are wise and who've walked through more life probably than even you have as a parent? That would be excellent. Yeah.
And then train for vocational discipleship.
Okay, so here's the other thing. my, I don't know. Do we talk to our young people about how any job that they take can be a job that is for the benefit of the kingdom?
I don't think we do. Not nearly enough.
Like Andy, okay, I'm just going to put, so you are a graduate of Indiana Wesleyan, and you got a technology degree, and was there ever a class that you took on integrating, I'm just thinking about this, integrating a Jesus following life into network administration?
I don't think so.
No, of course not. Right?
I mean, it was a Bible-based school, but
sure,
nothing, along those lines.
Right, and that's my point. And that's not a dig at any place. It's just my point.
It just doesn't. I mean, that's not. I was going for that, not necessarily for
right
vocational discipleship.
But the whole idea is that your vocation, what God has called you to, what He has gifted you with, the skills and abilities, all of that are toward that purpose, right? And right now, like one of my passions right now is pouring into Christian therapists, because so oftentimes therapists are trained in their therapy modalities and they are not trained in how to bring. It's like, okay, I'm trained in my therapy and all the methodologies there, and then I'm a follower of Jesus. And so now I'm going to try to figure out how my following Jesus informs my counseling practice, informs the therapy that I give. And that's a hard one, where I think it's like, well, here, be trained in the way of Jesus, and then as you're being trained in your vocation, therapy, whatever else, that training is being formed relationally. So vocational stuff is huge, and we don't God wants all of our lives, and that absolutely includes what we do for a living and how we're using it. So,
and then engaging in countercultural mission is the last 5 practice for building resilient disciples.
Yeah. So this is the other beautiful thing about adolescents. They want a cause. They want something
to rally behind
and to be serious about. And if you start that young, that chances are that practice and that engagement will go into older life. But here's the deal. We all know this. As we get older, engaging in countercultural mission is harder and harder. And our imagination for it kind of dries up a little bit. And so that's why this adolescent phase of life is just a absolute, it can be a well-watered garden for all kinds of positive growth. But again, we have to see it as an opportunity and not a problem to be fixed. And that's the key. That's, I guess, I could have just said that in 3 minutes. We could have made this podcast real short, but that's the idea, right? Like these making resilient disciples, everything that we engage in making those resilient disciples are perfect practices to be engaging in with adolescents because of where they are in life, and the fact that they will try things and they will experiment with things. And it's like, let's have them experiment with good things, not just not destructive things. But if you put it in front of them, they're gonna be more willing to try it. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, youth leaders, whoever you might be. It's worth it, I think. So yeah, that's my gig, man. We've just summarized
your whole speech.
3 days of seminar talks right there.
Well, before we end this, I do want to remind our listeners that this episode is brought to you by Concrete Barber. We love DJ. We love Concrete Barber. He keeps us looking fresh. Head over to concretebarber.com to get yourself a schedule. Get yourself scheduled with DJ.
Yeah, schedule.
Please. And also to go to his social media. The man is amazing.
Yeah,
when it comes to hair.
I'm getting on my phone right now and scheduling it. This beard, this beard got a little bit out of control. So DJ, I'm coming to visit you soon. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Andy, these folks have wasted almost another another good 50 minutes of time with us. We thank you so much. As always, you can head over to dudesanddadspodcast.com
and see all of our stuff. If you want to send us a voicemail, we love that. So 574-213-8702 is our voicemail number. And you know what, Joel? We're going to start doing these live on Facebook. So come join us on Facebook when we record. You'll look for it and you can comment and have fun.
Yeah, please do. Dudesanddadspodcast@gmail.com for emails as well. If you want to send us some pithy comments, perhaps some deep-rooted criticism, or an uplifting story about your cat. Till next time, guys, we wish you
grace
and peace.